Hello there, welcome back to Backyard Ballistics. I've been doing many restoration videos recently since that allows me to provide some sort of scientific content while keeping people interested, and in this period nothing interests viewers more than the word restoration combined with a rusted object on a thumbnail. However, wherever there's people attention there's money, and wherever there's money there are scams. A lot of restoration videos on YouTube are in fact fake, and a few people have been commenting under my recent videos suspecting that they were fake as well. So I thought I'd make this video to make it easier to spot fake restoration content when you see it. I'll mostly be focusing on gun restoration, but most concepts apply to objects predominantly made of steel in general. I don't want to spread any hate nor upset anybody, so I won't show real content that I believe is fake, but only my reenactments. However, I give you the resources needed to tell them apart from genuine content. First of all, we need to agree on what we call fake. Well, generally, when we say that a restoration is fake, we mean that the object being portrayed was originally in good condition and then ruined on purpose by the content creator in order to make an appealing video. This is very common, and I'll soon explain why, but first, let's differentiate between what I call strong and mild fakes. A strong fake is one in which the look of the object is altered through a process different than natural decay phenomena. In its most common form, the item is covered in a mixture of dyes, pigments, binders and fillers, usually tailored to look like some form of corrosion product. It's basically painted over, often with commercially available products. You can usually spot this kind of scammy content quite easily just by looking carefully. For example, there is no reason for a plastic or rubber piece to become rust-colored, nor for a steel object to develop green or bluish corrosion products. If you see a steel object with green stuff on it, then what you're looking at is most certainly fake. Steel's products of corrosion in a natural environment can be of any shade of orange, red, brown and black, but not green, blue or bright yellow. Actually, there is one of my videos that unfortunately looks like it's a strong fake, and it's this gun. Look at the grips. Usually they're made of plastic or wood, so they definitely do not rust, and a few people pointed that out in the comments. However, on that specific model, the grips are actually made of stamped steel, so it was natural for them to rust together with the rest of the gun. Another thing that could give away one of these fakes is the presence of uncovered areas that have been missed during the application of fake rust. For example, a slings weevil could leave a shadow during spraying, and there's no natural process that would leave such an appearance, so we can conclude with high confidence that we're looking at some form of fake rust. Another way to spot the use of fake rust is to look at the condition of the metal surface once it is cleaned. If all the material that was on top of it is made up of corrosion products, there must be a proportional amount of metal missing. For example, rusting on this part was very superficial, so it's okay to find a relatively smooth surface underneath. Finding a smooth surface under this one would instead be incompatible with the amount of corrosion product. Now, mild fakes are harder to tell apart, but they're also less of a scam. What happens is that the content creator takes an item in good or fair condition and subjects it to the same decay processes that can occur naturally, often in an environment that causes them to happen over a much shorter period of time. This still means that guns or items in good conditions are deliberately damaged for the purpose of making a restoration video, but at least the damage is realistic and the recovery process genuine. In other words, you can still learn something useful from the video. It's a bit like fireman training. The fire is caused on purpose, but the actions used to manage it are exactly the same as if the fire broke out on its own. But I get it that you'd still rather watch something whose aging was also genuine, rather than something that was ruined on purpose, mostly because we don't like the idea of being lied to. If the accelerated aging process is done properly, it's practically impossible to distinguish it from a natural one. It's a bit like artificial diamonds. They are made in a lab setting over the course of a few days instead of millions of years in the Earth's mantle. But if you do them right, the end result is practically undistinguishable. If the neglect that caused the decay happened over a relatively short period of time, the difference between genuine and fake is even more blurred. Just think about these. I could have buried some of these guns a few years ago just to do these videos now. It technically doesn't make any difference if it was me or somebody's granddad. However, there are many giveaways that you can look for if you want to find out whether the item was deliberately damaged shortly before filming the video. First of all, corrosion that happened over many years looks different. Look for these lamps. They are very hard crystals of corrosion products and they take very long to form. This one was on the K98K I restored. Another one where you can clearly see them is the Model 91 Carcano and also the Steyr 1912 that I did last. In order to cause this rusting on purpose, I would have needed to start doing it before I even thought of doing YouTube. So if you see these, the decay was probably genuine. Another useful thing to look for is wood. While the average YouTube restorer can figure out how to speed up the corrosion of steel, aging wood realistically is much harder. I've even seen somebody char the wood. There is no natural decay process that I know of that makes wood look like that. I just really hope they didn't throw the whole gun in the fire, since that messes up heat treatment and can cause the bridge to fail. So look if wooden parts are convincingly aged. The next big giveaway is gun type. Some guns are by far more likely to be found in miserable conditions than others. For example, in Italy, but I think the same applies to the rest of Europe, the vast majority of guns being found buried or hidden in buildings are World War II era or earlier. This doesn't mean that it's impossible to stumble across newer firearms in bad conditions, but it's much less likely. You'll never find a recent and expensive gun buried underground or in a building. It just doesn't happen. Mainly because modern weapons are heavily tracked in Europe, so it's very unlikely for somebody with a license to stash away or lose one. It's just very uncommon to stumble across heavily rusted firearms made after, say, 1980. Military firearms are a bit different in that they can be worn out and have lost their finish even if they are relatively recent, but they rarely get rusty because even the scruffiest arsenal soaks them in oils and greases them for storage. It's the private citizen that has to stash away guns in a hurry that typically lacks the knowledge to do it properly. However, this is not good for the average fake restoration channel, since very popular and video game famous guns are way more likely to gather millions of views, so restoration channels are actually encouraged to ruin some modern ones. Anything like Callahan's 44 Magnum revolver, a Glock pistol, AK-47, M16 or Desert Eagle will surely get a higher view count than a 1930s gun. It's just how the internet works. And this brings us to another very important risk factor for a video being fake. You see, if I had a $2,000 gun with my typical view count, I would actually make more money by selling the gun rather than ruining it to make a restoration video, especially considering how long it takes to make these videos. For channels that typically get a few 100,000 views per video like mine, doing this buy new, ruin and restore business wouldn't be economically feasible on the kind of guns that the average viewer wants to see. Keep in mind that a refinished gun is almost worthless on the collector's market, so I wouldn't be able to get any meaningful percentage of my money back after restoration. On the other hand, channels that get several millions of views per video actually earn so much from it that an expensive gun to ruin is an affordable expense. So to recap, here's what you should look for whenever you see a restoration video. As with anything you find online, treat it as fake unless proven otherwise. First, try to understand if it's a strong fake, that is, the corrosion product buildup is fake. If that's the case, that video has most likely little or nothing to teach you and the recovery process is probably just a masquerade. I'm not saying not to watch it, it could still be useful as white noise for getting asleep, but that's all, it's just white noise. If not, then the part is genuinely corroded, which means that a proper recovery process must be performed, and there could be something to learn from that. Still, treat anything you see as potentially fake, compare it with other sources and your own experience to assess the reliability of what you're watching. I always provide all the data necessary to perform any procedure I'm showing, so if you're still not convinced, you can do your own experiments and tell if the restoration process itself is real or not, which I think is the most important thing. If you also want to find out if the corrosion was caused on purpose, you can look for a few hints. First, age and price of the gun compared to its condition. An expensive gun, made after 1980 and heavily rusted, has most likely been rusted by whoever made the video. Second, view count compared to gun value. Channels that consistently get several millions of views can afford purposely ruining even expensive guns. A channel with an average view count lower than 500,000 can't. Third, look at wooden parts. If the wood looks burned, it probably is. And finally, presence of hard, dark rust lumps. If they're large, the corrosion was probably natural. Now that we've seen what is a good giveaway that a restoration is fake, let's see what is not. The presence of leftover bluing and the lack of corrosion on internal components are not clues of a non-genuine aging. That is because some parts, especially if they are covered by something else, including the stock, tend to retain lubricants and preservatives, and therefore resist corrosion much better than other, more exposed parts. It's not uncommon to find guns in absolutely dreadful conditions, but with their inside still greased, or the area under the stock in perfect condition. So what about my videos? Is some of them fake? And if so, is it a strong fake or a mild one? I've given you the knowledge to tell, so give them a closer look and let me know what you think in the comments. I give you a hint. I'm telling you that in one occasion I made a small bit of a gun look worse than it was for a thumbnail. I regret doing it, but you live and you learn. Would you be able to spot which part I'm talking about? And also where I could make it look worse without doing any real harm to the item? I hope you found this guide useful. I just ask you not to spread hate online. It doesn't help and can actually be counterproductive. Once again, a huge thanks goes to my patrons, which as usual are all listed here. Thank you all for watching, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.